Welcome in, everyone, to the Blue Demon Room podcast, where DePaul Athletics is so excited to bring you stories of its student athletes, coaches, and alumni. I'm your host, Casey Standahar, and I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest. She was one of DePaul's first female athletes, Millie Shemluck. Millie, thank you for coming on today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
You've been having some great conversations with us and our team, and you know it's Women's History Month. We're here today because you were one of DePaul's first female athletes, and you had to think about that. You were like, was I? And I think you were. What was that time like?
What was that time like? It was great. Mm-hmm. We didn't know, we had the gym when we had the gym, and if you practiced whenever you could, you didn't have set times, you didn't have, and you arranged a schedule and played. We had a nice, when I was a student here, we had a group called WAA, which was actually a club in essence.
The Women's Athletic Association.
Women's Athletic Association, that was a club. And the woman that oversaw that club was a woman named Jean Nordberg, who she's my idol, my mentor. She was an era where I don't know if she got much of anything. If she got paid, it was nickels and dimes, and but she was wonderful. She was just the perfect person to have that influence on me. And I competed in gymnastics and volleyball. I wasn't very good at volleyball. I liked gymnastics, and I did okay at that because I had a dance background. I had been taking dance since I was young. Then I graduated from DePaul and came back and taught and started to coach.
Sure.
And I coached gymnastics, volleyball, and Jean was still coaching. I think she was doing basketball. We didn't have there was no softball. But that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And women who played because they really loved playing, and they loved sports. And then things started to change too. There was more emphasis on women athletes. Title IX came about. There was no abrupt change with Title IX, except that the gymnast, one of my gymnasts that was very good, I was able to get a scholarship for her, which was a first for DePaul. I think that was the only female,
that's so cool.
The first female scholarship that was given. And also things like paying for food. Food was never paid for. And getting gym shoes. The volleyball team had gym shoes that was their own. And then now all of a sudden they had the opportunity to have gym shoes that was given to them, and they didn't have to buy them.
These things that feel like just the norm now.
Yes.
We're really just starting back when you were here at DePaul. What does it mean to you to connect with women who were athletes back then and kind of seeing how it's all progressed since that moment?
I think DePaul, and my experience, is just outstanding. For instance, Jeannie Lenti, who just retired as that women's athletic director, she was an athlete that played sports under, when I was coaching. Tina Brown was actually, I think, technically the first athletic director. Maybe she didn't have exactly that title. So, and these are all women that were influenced because they had played and they stepped into that role. I think Jean has done an outstanding job for DePaul and for women. She's been involved nationally, and what more could you ask for? So as a university, I shouldn't say that. I did a lot of things too when I was teaching here before Title IX. Now that I'm thinking about this, now I have to remember the exact name. There was a committee of 7 women, of which I was one of, that would oversee collegiate sports, women's collegiate sports. And they're one of the, I remember one woman in particular wanted us to have women to have a higher standard than men. I don't know what that meant, but a higher standard, which was great. And we all were required to go to so many of the championship games because they wanted to make sure that there was no violations and that everything was near perfect. I don't think there's such a thing as
So you
perfect.
guys were trying to level up even back then, just to compete, not only compete with the men, but just set your own bar.
I'd say yes, yes. No one was thinking of ways to cheat. Wouldn't even know how. So everything, was on the up and up, and a lot of good vibes amongst team members. I mean, no one was like, I can't stand being with her. It was just really a great friendship, a great standard and that's why everyone enjoyed it. And many of the women, when I was a student, I had some flexibility with my time, not a lot, but most of the women that were on this in WAA with me, they had jobs. They were students, they had jobs, so competing was not the number one idea.
How did you balance all of that with jobs, with competing, with little pay? How was that?
I don't know. You enjoyed doing it, and it was a good group. I mean, why would you do it if it was if you were around a bunch of bad people, you probably wouldn't do it. But I think it was just an outstanding group.
Speaking
of a big part of it.
An outstanding group, you coached alongside the late Dr. Jean Nordberg. You mentioned her. She was also a part of the WAA. What was she like? What was her role like? How did she really amplify everything for you guys?
Jean had one of those personalities that was very even keel. You never saw her get too mad. You never saw her be overly jubilant. But I think she seriously loved what she was doing. And when she wasn't teaching, and she really enjoyed basketball, she would have been, but there was no such thing, she would have been a great men's basketball coach because she saw the game. But at that time, you didn't have any women coaching.
And now we're seeing men or women in men's coaching roles and in Major League Baseball and the NBA.
She would have been perfect.
That's so cool.
She would have been perfect. And she gave a lot of her time it's not like, sometimes I think society has changed where you're looking to see what are the rewards. If you hire me, do I have to, right now I think you're hearing about this. Do I have to be at my desk 5 days a week? And that was not something we were worried about. If you had to do something, you did it. And if you had to stay late, you did it. And, and most of us, you're talking about Jean and I, we didn't have buses. And it was either the students driving their cars or us driving our cars.
So different back then. How do you feel like Title IX being passed changed the state of women's athletics at DePaul specifically?
Well, I think it did because they couldn't put off making the changes. They couldn't put off offering scholarships. They had to start paying up. That's basically it. I'd say other than that, there was not any, huge fireworks. It was just, they had to pay up, and they did.
What was it like reconnecting this past February at the women's basketball game with some of the women you knew back then at DePaul?
It's always fun to get together. Yeah. I think the women from WAA that I would like to see them, and they have them. They came up to a few events, but I think it would be great to. But see, back then it didn't. We talked about how did you balance, having a job, going to school full time, and still wanting to play a sport. So that was tough. Most of them, but it's interesting. A lot of them have children and grandchildren that have been in sports.
Yeah.
So
why do you feel like it's so important to keep those connections alive and keep talking about the progression of women's athletics?
I think you have to. You have to look at the past to see the future. And, hopefully women's sports is not in jeopardy, which is a minor possibility, I would say. But I think women in general could have some issues. But anyways, if you care. You knew these people around you cared. I don't remember us having arguments. I don't remember us feeling like, why am I here? None of those feelings. We did it because we loved the sport or we got enjoyment out of it. We enjoyed being with the other women. No big trophies.
Sure. Right. It wasn't about that, right?
No. I think the few trophies we had, I probably had them packed away at some point and maybe should have donated to university, but I don't know where. They're long gone. So
today now, beyond trophies, there are NIL deals, there's scholarships, so many different incentives to being a college athlete. And, when you were a gymnast, there weren't as many and NIL wasn't a thing. What kept you going?
Well, first of all, I think Jean, was my mentor. She had a positive attitude, which was fabulous. And I enjoyed it. And it was able to challenge me. I was able to be, grow what talent I had.
Yeah.
And that's what kept me going.
Do you still watch gymnastics? Are you watching women's sports on TV?
I coached for many years.
Sure.
And I haven't coached in recent years. And my little crew from coaching, from judging, I'm sorry. From judging has said, wants me back to judge high school, which I may or may not do this coming season. But there's a group that was good for me. Once I left DePaul, I did keep up judging, and I did that for many years in the high school, and then I gave that up. You could imagine, if you look at gymnastics, trying to judge that.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Very difficult.
difficult.
Why is it so tough? Because it's just so intricate?
Yeah, because you have to know every move.
Yeah.
Because every move has a grade attached to it. And plus, what is a minor, if your toes aren't completely pointed. Seriously.
Women have to be perfect, right?
And a wobble on the balance beam. You have to be in phenomenal condition.
Sure.
And injury is always there.
And the pressure, too.
Yep. It's become from year to year. Simone Biles has changed the sport horrendously. Didn't they name a move? I think they named a move after her.
Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of documentaries and movies about her career.
Yeah.
She's been incredible.
And she seems
watch.
very down to earth. She doesn't seem to be.
Right.
I think that's the problem with NIL. You may be able to go in a direction. I don't think that's healthy when you're 20 years old.
Yeah.
That's just me.
What were some of the women on your team like back then? Do you remember them, and what were they
Well, I
like?
think I stood up to how many weddings? A couple, 2, 3.
Sure.
So,
So you stayed close.
yeah, we did. And, then you drift apart. Life does that.
Right.
It's just a good group.
That's good. That's good to hear. When you were a coach at DePaul, how did you help negotiate these scholarships for your athletes?
I only negotiated one, which
Okay.
was the first one. I didn't do a lot of negotiation. I just basically talked to Ray Meyer, and he said, okay. So,
That's all you had to do?
no,
I love it.
no big speech. I didn't,
Sure.
none of that. I may have said some things, but I don't, it was nothing that seemed to be of significance. Or the only
Okay.
thing I did feel that was unfair was, as you're competing, but you can't offer these students anything. You can't offer to buy them a hot dog after they play. You can't say, well, you could wear those shoes one more game. So that I thought was unfair.
Sure. What did DePaul look like when you were here? Like, did you feel like it was a lot different, or did it kind of look the same as it does now? This neighborhood, this area, the campus?
Well, the area was, you wish you had bought a house here when I was here, because you could retire. I'd say the area was a lot less busy. And of course, we had the old gym across the street, which they knocked down.
Oh, yeah.
And we did host. I hosted a few meets at the Alumni Hall. It was more modest. Everything was more modest. I wouldn't, it wasn't like it was terrible and we were going down into a cave we had a locker room, not a very impressive one, but a locker room. And the gym was well cared for. So the gym always looked fabulous. Now, we did have to move our own equipment, which
Never easy.
I can't believe we did. We always, when I wanted to practice on the beam and I had like an hour break, I would go down, open the equipment room. The beam was on rollers. I'd roll it out. I figured out a way to get on it and lift it up a little bit, flip the wheels out, and then I could practice for an hour or half hour, 45 minutes, and then put the wheels back on and roll it back into the equipment room. I don't know if
That's amazing.
It was.
You made the time.
Yeah.
Millie, you have so much knowledge about what DePaul was like back then. Don't laugh. I feel like really you do, and it's been great to have you kind of share all that with us. We talked in the break about Frank McGrath and his special shoe policy. Can you tell us more about his policy and why he had that policy?
He probably valued the gym floor at Alumni Hall more than he valued anything else. So he wanted you to always wear either gym shoes or no shoes. You couldn't, street shoes on that floor was like a no-no. And it seems like he could come out of the rafters if he saw you on the floor in street shoes and start screaming. And he was, once again, you have someone who's totally dedicated to DePaul. And totally, he's, Alumni Hall is his baby. And he was Ray's assistant. Because what exists in sports, there's always a head coach. But a head coach is always only going to be, in my opinion, after working, only going to be as good as his assistant
Right.
or his staff because he can't do it all. And Frank was there to be Ray's assistant.
And you just talked about Ray. The campus gym is named after Ray Meyer. Can you tell us again, who he was and what he was like at DePaul?
To me, Ray was just being a regular guy. He used to eat at Roma's restaurant, which is a shame it's not still here. But at Roma's, and I would go over and eat with him. And there's always like a round table in the back and different people, coaches many times from whoever DePaul was playing. Like Marquette's coach, Al McGuire, would be in there, who was always, Al was a treat. And people could come and go, eat lunch with him if there was, and people who didn't know him well wouldn't just sit down at this table. So it was usually people that knew him. And Ray had 1,000 stories, if not 5,000. And he's another one. He loved the sport, and basketball was his thing.
What was it about Ray and Frank that you think kept them going? Was it just their genuine love for the sport and for athletics?
Yeah, I'd say yes, and that, and he had his people, and his people were part of that. And I don't think DePaul messed with him, so he pretty much, I don't think what would the priests know about playing basketball? We could interject a little humor here. But so Ray could pretty much had control, and he was an up and standing guy. He wasn't going to say, let's bring some player in that wasn't qualified or something else. He didn't do that.
What do the men's team standards look like? We talked about the women's standards, and we talked a little bit about this in the break, but how do you feel like the standards were back then, and how have they changed?
Well, the only thing I would say, and I don't know how they've changed, because I don't, the only thing would be some of the better players, could get away with not attending class. I mean, not necessarily missing the entire semester, but missing class, especially if it was game day. They could get away with that.
A little more leniency back then, maybe.
Pardon me?
A little more leniency, maybe, back then.
Yes, I would say a little more leniency, yes.
Right.
And, but they were good, depending on the year. Once again, I think some of the teams were very close and some weren't. They had also had a good crowd. They had a good, see, I remember everybody's name. They had, Ray had his little entourage of coaching help. And they, I can't remember much else. And they always got, they look good. Now that I'm saying it, though, I just remembered something else. We had a cheerleading squad, which I ended up, taking over. And I remember driving to Indiana. There was a company that made cheerleading uniforms. So I got them to agree to pay for new uniforms. Once again, I don't know how I did that. Don't ask me, I don't know. Anyways, so we drove to Indiana. I drove to Indiana. I'm trying to remember who was with me. And so we could pick out new uniforms for the women, for the cheerleaders. That's always, you want them to look good. Probably the other cheerleading story is when we played Marquette, Marquette would do everything in their power to intimidate us. I mean, everything.
Like what?
Oh, they brought the cheerleaders. The alums from Marquette would rent limos.
What?
And the cheerleaders would arrive in limos.
Wow. So that you made you guys feel kind of like, oh.
Yeah, so the DePaul cheerleaders didn't feel like they were top notch.
Wow.
Yes.
That's crazy.
And I don't know the details of the story, but one time Al McGuire, now he didn't do this, he had a big staff, but one time they would say, don't sell a block of tickets to Marquette, blah, 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 blah. You have to realize Alumni Hall held, 5,000 maybe?
Yeah.
Think about games today at big universities, and 5,000 is like nothing. And so somehow Marquette got away with buying tickets and bringing their band. So that we didn't have a band, or if we had one, it was 2 people. So there was Marquette's whole band, and their cheerleaders arriving in limos to play DePaul.
So what did you tell your cheer team when you guys saw that moment, how to kind of not feel that intimidation?
I acted like I wasn't impressed.
Yeah. Because if you act not impressed, then they're going to be like, oh, okay. Coach doesn't care. We don't care either.
But I thought that was quite clever, whoever thought of that, bringing
That's
that.
interesting. I love that. Going back to the men's team and just players in general, we were talking about how when you looked for a star player to build your team around, that was kind of the thing back then. Do you think that's a positive change that was made? Or now, like you were saying, it's kind of more about the team?
I think basketball is more about the team. Look at professional sports. How much could you pay these guys?
Right.
And could they win? I don't know. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for looking at a team. Look at the Cubs. I've been a Cubs fan for a long time. But the Cubs, the same thing. I mean, you could have star players, but you've got to work as a team. And I think there's probably athletes out there that don't think of themselves as being part of a team. They're number one, and that's it. And I really think to win takes that chemistry of people to work. It takes the coach, the assistant. You have the staff behind them. Especially now, it's gigantic. And the Bulls were great if you saw them when Michael Jordan played, but they haven't been able to put together much of a team. And even the Bears, I mean, they could spend a lot of money. Well, the Bears need to spend more money, I think.
We could talk all day about all the teams in Chicago and the struggles, for sure.
I do think there's a lot to be said for basketball. And when you look back at the team that was, well, Mark Aguirre had a great team, and then you had Joe Ponsetto and Dave Corzine and those guys. And they were all friends. I think they're still friends to this day.
What do you think is different about now with so much money on the line with these NIL deals and just with the sponsorships, all the things that go into it?
I think it clouds your judgment. Money clouds everybody's judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, it
is what it is.
Nothing more said.
I want to get into your career in real estate. You are a real estate agent now, and I just want to hear more about that experience for you and what that's been like over the years.
I'm with a company that's newer to Chicago, so most people don't recognize the name, called Ingalls and Volker. They're German. And the woman that heads up my office is called Jenny Ames, and I think that's an interesting segue and has some sports related. It's a good team. I like being there because I like the team. I like the people that are around me.
So your lessons from back in DePaul are kind of paying off in your career too.
Yeah. Because I worked for other I actually had a good team. I was part of the sales team at a new development it started in 2000 called Museum Park. And we had a good team there. We had a very good leader, once again, a good mentor for me. And it made a difference.
What made you want to stay in the Chicago area? I know you said you're in Jefferson Park now, but what made you want to stay around Chicago?
I have no desire to leave. I don't.
You love it here.
Where am I going to go? I don't see other. I never was a suburban type person for some reason.
Sure.
I grew up in the inner city. That's what I knew. I see value in the city. I couldn't connect with the suburbs. My parents had a neighborhood grocery store.
Oh, what was it called?
Shemluck's.
I should have known. That's cool.
So you grew up in a neighborhood where people knew both good and bad, because people were nosy. But then on the other hand, it was just people were nice and people were considerate.
Yeah. You never wanted to take over the family grocery store?
No. Well, my father wanted, I have two older brothers. My father he really wanted us to have education. He was big. That was super important to him. And it didn't matter that I was a woman. I still had to get an education. There's three of us. So none of us, and maybe that was, sometimes I think one of us should have stayed behind. But all three of us got an education, moved on.
Yeah. What do you think made getting an education in the city so special?
I don't even know if I thought about it. I wasn't ready to leave. My dad had died when I was in high school, so I wasn't going to go somewhere where I wasn't around to help, because all three of us, of course, were there to help my mom. And so I didn't see the value. I don't think I was ready emotionally to just go to another state or something else.
Did you and your siblings play other sports growing up?
No. My two brothers played football in high school, And my brother, the middle one, actually did some gymnastics at U of I. But he,
Okay.
Yeah.
And lastly, I just want to know, what do you feel like is special about Chicago in general?
The people. You could go any place and have a gym, but it's who's around you
Sure.
that makes it all the difference.
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome talking to you, Millie. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing just your knowledge, your experience, stories from the
It
past.
was pretty
of DePaul.
painless, so.
Pretty painless. I'm glad. I'm glad we kept it painless. We appreciate you being a part of our Women's History Month series and our episodes on the Blue Demon Room. We are just so grateful for your time.
Yes, I feel sometimes like it's not that big a deal, but thank you for
It is a big
acknowledging.
deal. It is, because we have, like you said, we have to look at the past to get into the future, and just hearing about your experiences and as a woman in sports and as a woman at DePaul, it's been really awesome for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your time. And that was the episode of the Blue Demon Room podcast with Millie Shemluck. We'll see you next time.